Can you believe that my own family, my flesh and blood, decided it was perfectly acceptable to send out over 200 wedding invitations with my farm's address listed as the venue, all without so much as a phone call, an email, or even a carrier pigeon message to ask me first? Just imagine you're minding your own business, living your quiet life, and then suddenly you're staring down the barrel of a full-blown wedding reception for a couple hundred people you barely know, all because your family decided to take over your property without your consent. Seriously, was I in the wrong for absolutely losing my mind and shutting it all down? Tell me honestly, would you have just rolled over and let them do it? Let me take you back to how this unbelievable mess started. I live on a fairly large property, a working farm that's been in my family for generations. It's not some pristine, manicured estate designed for events. It's a farm. There are barns, fields, equipment, and livestock. It's my sanctuary, my livelihood, and my private space. I love my family, I really do, but we've always had this dynamic. They're a bit on the entitled side, especially when it comes to me and my resources. They see my farm as this quaint, picturesque backdrop for their various schemes, rather than a place where I actually work and live. I'm the quiet one, the reliable one, the one who generally avoids conflict. This, I now realize, has been my fatal flaw. The whole saga began with my cousin, Bethany. Bethany is, well, Bethany, she's sweet enough, but she's also the kind of person who expects everything to be handed to her on a silver platter. Her fiancé, Mark, is a decent guy, a little meek, but I genuinely like him. They got engaged about 8 months ago, and the wedding planning immediately became this massive, all-consuming event for the entire extended family, or at least for my aunts and uncles who live vicariously through these things. I was, of course, invited to the wedding, and I sent a polite RSVP, wishing them well. I assumed it would be held in a normal venue, like a church hall or a hotel ballroom, given Bethany's taste for the finer, more conventional things in life. I had no reason to think otherwise. I was busy with lambing season, then haying, then dealing with a persistent issue with my well pump. My life on the farm is demanding, and frankly, wedding planning was the last thing on my mind. About 2 months ago, I started getting some strange phone calls. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years would call me, not to chat, but to ask very specific questions about the farm. Is there good parking for a lot of cars? Do you have enough restrooms for a big crowd? Is the ground level enough for a tent? At first, I was confused. I figured they were just making small talk, or perhaps planning a different family gathering. I'd answer vaguely like, yeah, there's plenty of space. Or I've got a couple of restrooms in the main house. It didn't click. My brain simply couldn't process the sheer audacity of what was unfolding. I assumed they were asking about hypothetical situations, not a very real, very imminent invasion of my private property. I'm a trusting person, perhaps to a fault. Then came the first concrete clue, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. My Aunt Carol, Bethany's mother, called me. She was usually very formal and reserved with me, so her casual tone immediately put me on edge. "Oh, by the way, darling," she chirped, "I need to know the dimensions of your largest barn. We're trying to figure out if the catering tent will fit inside for the reception in case it rains." My largest barn, catering tent. My blood ran cold. "Aunt Carol," I asked, trying to keep my voice even, "what exactly are you talking about?" There was a pause, a very telling pause, followed by a slight laugh. "Oh, you know, for Bethany's wedding, didn't she tell you, we decided the farm would be just perfect. So rustic, so charming." My jaw dropped. I literally felt it unhinge. "No, Aunt Carol, Bethany did not tell me. No one told me. This is the first I'm hearing of this." My voice was rising. I couldn't help it. "You decided my farm would be perfect for a wedding. A wedding that I apparently just learned about being held here." She sounded genuinely surprised, almost indignant. "Well, of course, it's family, dear. You wouldn't mind, would you? It saves them a fortune on venue costs, and it's so picturesque." She then started listing all the benefits for me, like how I'd get to host a beautiful event, and how it would be a lovely memory. Lovely memory? It sounded like a nightmare. I remember thinking, is this a prank? Is someone playing a cruel joke on me? But it wasn't a joke. It was horrifyingly real. I hung up the phone feeling completely violated. I immediately called Bethany, but she didn't answer. I called my mother, hoping she could shed some light on this. Maybe tell me it was a misunderstanding. Instead, my mother was exasperated. "Oh, honey, don't make a big deal out of it. It's just a wedding. They thought you'd be happy to help out family." Happy to help out family? By letting 200 strangers tramp through my farm, use my facilities, and disrupt my work, all without asking. This was not helping out family. This was a hostile takeover. My mother explained that the family, specifically Bethany and her parents, had been discussing this for months. They'd apparently convinced themselves that since it was a family farm, and since I lived there, it was essentially a communal space that they could use as they pleased. They had already sent out the invitations, all 200 of them, with my address clearly printed. At that point, I felt a knot of pure rage tighten in my stomach. The audacity was beyond anything I had ever experienced. They hadn't just assumed, they had acted on that assumption, completely disregarding my ownership, my privacy, and my well-being. I started to imagine the chaos. Cars clogging my dirt roads, people wandering into my fields, potentially disturbing my animals, using my septic system, which is definitely not designed for 200 people, leaving trash, God knows what else. My farm, my sanctuary, would be turned into a public park for a day, and I would be the unwitting host. The worst part was the complete lack of respect. Not even a heads up, let alone a request. They had literally planned an entire wedding on my property behind my back. So, that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. My family had, in essence, stolen my property for a day and presented me with a fait accompli. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have gritted your teeth and let them have their wedding? Or would you have drawn a line in the sand, even if it meant a massive family fallout? I spent that night pacing my farmhouse, trying to figure out how to handle this without completely destroying my relationship with my family, especially my mother. But the more I thought about it, the more enraged I became. This wasn't just about the wedding. It was about years of them taking advantage of my good nature, assuming I'd always be there to bail them out, to lend money, to do favors, all without any reciprocity or respect for my boundaries. This was the straw that broke the camel's back. I decided that morning that I couldn't let it happen. I just couldn't. It would set a precedent that I would never recover from. The next day, I called Bethany. She finally answered, and her tone was surprisingly cheerful. "Oh, hey, I was just about to call you. Do you have any preference for where the cake table goes in the barn?" That was it. That casual assumption, that cheerful proprietorial air, it snapped something inside me. "Bethany," I said, my voice steady but firm, "there isn't going to be a cake table in my barn. There isn't going to be a wedding on my farm." There was a stunned silence on the other end. What are you talking about? Of course, there is. The invites are already out." Her voice was starting to get shrill. "Bethany," I continued, You and your parents decided to use my private property as your wedding venue without asking me. That is not okay. I did not give permission, and I am not giving permission now. Wedding cannot be held here." And that's when the meltdown began. Bethany started crying, wailing about how I was ruining her special day, how I was being selfish, how I was unfamily. Her mother, my Aunt Carol, quickly got on the line, yelling at me about how dare I go back on my word, which I never gave, and how much money they had already spent on sending out invitations with my address. She even accused me of trying to sabotage Bethany's happiness. My mother then called me, pleading with me to reconsider, telling me I was being unreasonable. The pressure was immense. Every family member who heard about it started calling, some trying to mediate, most just trying to trip me into submission. But I stood my ground. I calmly, repeatedly explained that no one had asked me, and that my farm was not a public venue. I told them that I understood they were in a difficult situation, but it was a situation of their own making. I suggested they send out change of venue cards or contact their guests directly. I even offered to help them find a different affordable venue. But I would not, under any circumstances, allow my farm to be used. I offered no compromise on that point. It was a difficult conversation, or rather, a series of difficult conversations, filled with tears, accusations, and a lot of very hurt feelings on their part. On my part, there was a strange mix of guilt and immense relief. In the end, after about a week of intense family drama, they finally accepted my decision. Bethany and Mark ended up scrambling to find a new venue, a local community hall, which I heard was perfectly lovely. They had to send out new invitations, incurring more costs, which I'm sure they resented me for. The wedding did happen, and I did attend, mostly out of a sense of obligation and a desire not to completely sever ties. It was awkward, to say the least. My aunt and Bethany barely spoke to me, and there was a palpable chill in the air from many of my relatives. But you know what? I don't regret it, not one bit. Standing up for myself, for my boundaries, for my private property, was one of the hardest but most important things I've ever done. It taught me that sometimes protecting yourself means making uncomfortable decisions and facing the disapproval of others, even family. It also taught my family a very hard lesson about respect and consent. Things are still a bit strained, but I think, in the long run, it will lead to a healthier dynamic. Maybe, just maybe, they'll ask next time. So, that's my story of how my family tried to throw a 200-person wedding on my farm without my permission. Like this video if you were on my side, subscribe for more stories like this, and share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. I'll see you all in the next story.